Okay, this is the accessible part. In some classrooms, that's the way it is. Or you kind of put them by the door or off to the side with their chairs out of the way. And that's really being discriminatory towards that student. I mean, that student should have as much right to sit where they want as any other student. It shouldn't really be dependent upon the fact that there's an opening here, or they're more out of the way and not in people's way by putting them over in the corner. And this classroom is a perfect example of, make it welcoming, and you can do that as the teacher, because you can move these desks any way you want. And you can certainly, talk to the student when they come in and say, is there any place you prefer sitting? Ask them. Get right up front there and say that, and get their input, and then try to get them there. Because in some classrooms we call accessible now, where they're built to be accessible. We have this spot over on the side that you can put a wheelchair in, and they call that accessible. Well, if you're working in a classroom that's like that, try to keep in mind that you have students over there. Okay, that maybe some of the things you do isn't going to work real well for them, is going to be difficult to see, that might be difficult for them to hear. Keep that in mind when you're doing things. One of the things I always like to do when I teach is I like to move around a lot. I have a disability, I have ADD, and for me sitting still is very hard anyway. So it keeps the attention of everyone if you move around a little bit. That was one of the first things I learned in Teaching 101, my methods course, is that if you move around a little bit, you gain everyone's attention, and it's very, very good for students who have ADD. If you move around, it captures their attention, because when you have an attention problem, it's the little things that grab your attention. It's the little things. So if you're moving around, it's a lot easier to focus. So if you just, every once in a while, you don't have to continually be moving around like a lion or something, but if every once in a while you just move around or do something that's going to regather their attention, it's really effective. And it's actually effective for all students to try to bring them back to you, because you're the focus here. I think most of the time that's going to be true in most teaching. Now, when you have a projector, like we were doing earlier, a lot of the focus is on that, but you don't always want it to be on that. I hate handouts that like we did when you put the PowerPoints on a page and I'm talking, because people tend to be visual learners, will almost always be doing this, and they're not paying attention to you. And a lot of times, I'm sure most of you give your instruction to try to, you want them to listen to you, especially students with certain disabilities like ADD. It's hard to do two things. It's very hard to do them. And sometimes it's very hard to focus on the thing you need to be focusing on. So a lot of times those things can be more distracting. I know they're helpful for a lot of people, but for a lot of people they're distracting. And if you can put your handouts and information on a website ahead of time, that's good for students with who have visual disabilities, or who might have trouble for other reasons looking at whatever you bring in class. That's going to be really helpful to put it up there. They can access it. They can be more into what it is you're talking about, whatever it is. They can understand it to a greater degree. I mean, there's nothing worse than to not be able to see something, and this person's talking about something you can't see, and you have no idea what it is, and they're making it. This is an important point. Half of your grade is going to be based on what I'm talking about right here. There's probably nothing worse for a student than to say, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know what they're talking about. I can't see what it is. Or, in the case of someone with a hearing problem, I can't hear. Or, in the case of students with ADD, they're not paying attention to the right thing. That's very difficult. One of the tricks I always did when I was studying is I turn on the TV. Now, some people might think, okay, how can you study if you get the TV on? Having that consistent noise in the background, a fan does that a lot too. And you can always do that in a classroom or in a testing environment. If you turn a fan on, it's that white noise. It makes it easy for a student with attention deficit disorder to focus on what they're doing, because the background noise is consistent. And then they can pay attention to what they need to pay attention on. Nothing worse for a majority of ADD students than silence. It's one of the worst things in the world, because any little noise will disrupt them. Well, their concentration is going to go off. So keep that in mind too. When you look at the layout of the classroom, try to remember to have it set up, and you can do this. I mean, a classroom this size, you can set it up any way you want for the way you teach. This is kind of a nice, I've always kind of liked this circular rather than the row method or something like that, because you can look around and people feel like they're more engaged, they can see each other, and it's a more welcoming, open environment, and that's true of anyone. And it's especially true for someone who feels left out anyway. You know, the more welcoming you can make it, the better it is. You know, rows are not warm or welcoming. They're very structured, they're very segmented, you feel like you're not a part of the group oftentimes. You feel like you're way off. And you don't want that in a classroom. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be paying attention to what you're doing. Does anyone see any other issues that you would have with a classroom like this?
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I haven't very often taught in this room, but every so often I do, where I come in and I administer a student evaluation or something like that. And that corner back there is very odd. And the people that tend to congregate back there are, I think they're people who want to isolate themselves from what's going on in the rest of the room.
I think you're right. To me, that feels very isolated. If you're up here talking, it's like, what's going on back there? You know, I used to teach middle school, so I would never allow something like that. I'd put something back there so they couldn't get back there.
In French class, it's not a problem. We don't have any students. But in Spanish class, every one of these chairs will be full. So
Yeah.
it's a problem.
One
That's
of
a
the
good point.
things, I gave a talk yesterday in Morris Hall with PowerPoint. Well, I didn't use the PowerPoint. I used that, I don't know what it's called, but you put this on it and it reflects.
Visualizer.
Okay.
Opaque projector light.
And the room was not big enough, and so it was really scrunchy. It looked awful, whereas when I had given it a larger room, it came out really clearly, but I found that.
That's a good point. You know, you might develop just the greatest things to use in a classroom, and you step into that classroom and it doesn't work. You know, that's a perfect example of it. If you have the opportunity, look over the classroom ahead of time and get a feel for it. It's kind of like getting the lay of the land.
Tim, can you pull that screen down? Just I want to see how big it is.
Okay.
What is the document projector back there, if you don't show them?
Oh yeah, overhead. Yep.
We have a cart that we can bring in with other kinds of media on it too.
It feels like a small screen.
It does. You're right.
Because as soon as you get the aspect ratio, you're only using a part of that screen, and if you're sitting in the back, it's small.
And of course, can you imagine sitting over here if you have a visual problem anyway, and trying to see what the heck's on that screen? It's like June said, probably anything in here with something like that is going to be very hard to get very square and very focused so that you can see it from any angle. That's going to be almost impossible. That's where technology really helps out a lot. You know, we have really nice stuff now if you can take advantage of it. One of the things, you know, if you can, PowerPoints, because you can make those accessible. You can put them on the web ahead of time. You know, it makes things so nice. And PowerPoints are easy to make accessible. Roger mentioned earlier that if you use the notes part of there and put information in there, that then becomes accessible for a student with a screen reader. And that's really helpful. So you're not only putting information there that you might want to use, but you're putting information there that can tell students who might not be able to see what you have visually here, who have trouble with that. They'll know exactly what's going on, and they can know ahead of time if you put this on your website so that they can get to it. That's really helpful.
I think your